Donald Trump's DOJ and their maliciousness and recklessness and just rampant corruption have been frequently caught hiding evidence, concealing evidence, not producing evidence as it's supposed to be produced during discovery. I can give you a few data points as well. You don't hear a lot about the Don Lemon case anymore, do you? Because even though the Trump regime rushed to get Don Lemon arrested in like California, even though what they allege happened was in Minnesota. Remember, it was reporting on a protest in a church out there. And then they arrested him right away and they made a whole big public deal about it. They don't want to turn over their discovery in that case. And if you follow what's happening there, the Trump regime and their DOJ is doing everything to slow down discovery. Let's call this a complex designation. Let's do superseding indictments and add more people. Drag it out, drag it out, drag it out. It is actually identical to how Donald Trump ran the frivolous cases that he would file against people as a vexatious plaintiff civil litigation, where he would sue everybody, get the splashy headlines, make sure he said all of this venomous stuff to try to get it protected by legal privileges, right? And then when the case would actually start and he would say, all right, sit for a deposition, show me the document, show me the discovery, delay, 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 delay. He then tries to bury you in delays and lawyer fees and extensions. So maybe you reach a resolution, or eventually when the cases go away, people don't remember it all that much and it just fades into the news cycle with all of his other distractions, right? We see that happen time and time again on immigration cases where I did a report on it with Harry Litman last week. There were these 7,000 cases recently where basically after the Trump regime's ICE and Border Patrol Gestapo would kidnap people off the streets and the cases would start, they wouldn't submit declarations and affidavits or evidence to support their claims that the individuals who were placed in these camps, I call concentration camps, were doing anything wrong or deserved to be there. And the judges would say, well, you're not putting forward any evidence. Now, this gets even particularly more profound when we're dealing with deaths, murders that are taking place. And I can tell you when I was a civil litigator out here in California and I handled police excessive force cases, particularly Bakersfield, Kern County, and Fresno area, one of the hard things you would deal with is the disparity of evidence, that they would control lots of the evidence. You would hear about a police shooting, but like in order for you to get the body cams and all of these things, they would drag it out. But, you know, at the end of the day, they would have to produce it eventually. And they would work in task force. Oftentimes there would be layered onto these police shootings, joint state, local task forces that were required by law. And right now, though, one of the things that we're seeing is with all of these deaths that are taking place at these concentration camps and detention centers, and of course, the high profile murders that took place during the Trump regime occupation of Minnesota, Renee Good, Alex Pretty, the Trump regime seized all of the evidence right away and then refused to have any state, local, municipal police officers work with the feds. And one of the things that we've known in other immigration cases that the feds would do, for example, during their occupation and invasion of Chicago, is where their car would be involved in an incident, or where they would ram somebody, or where they would shoot somebody there. They would like remove the evidence to other states or drive their cars in other places versus safely and securing the evidence so that the right types of investigations would take place. So when it comes to the murder of Renee Good and Alex Pretty, state and local officials are like, we want to be involved at some level in this investigation. This happened in our jurisdiction. We want to determine the cause, the manner, whether charges should be filed at a state level. And the Trump regime's like, no, you're out. We're not letting you be involved in this at all. And so what do you do when the DOJ, which was supposed to, in theory, be the good guys, have become the cartel, have become the bad guys, and they don't want to participate, do join, or serve the ends of justice. They just want to serve the ends of corruption and criminality. Well, you may have heard by now, but this lawsuit that was filed in Washington, D.C. federal court by the state of Minnesota, as Scott McFarlane reports, now in the MeidasTouch network, Scott McFarlane, he reports how, and it's great to say that, how the state of Minnesota has filed a federal civil lawsuit against the Trump regime. They're seeking a court order to force the regime to hand over records about the murders of Good and Pretty. The suit asks a judge to declare that defendants' policies or practices of refusing to share investigative materials with Minnesota authorities concerning the federal officer-involved shootings arising out of Operation Metro Surge is arbitrary and capricious. I want to bring in Harry Litman from the Talking Feds YouTube channel, Talking Feds Substack, and Talking Feds podcast. Harry, great to see you as always. Harry was the top United States prosecutor in the Western District of Pennsylvania, the U.S. attorney there, top federal prosecutor in Maine Justice. I mean, Harry, one of the biggest and most obvious obligations that the DOJ has is to produce evidence, handle it with care. You know, obviously, yes, there would be the rare case, the rarest of case, but a bad one, where someone in the DOJ would be exposed, tampering, hiding, right? There'd be criminal charges brought against them. Immediately, everybody in the chain of command would be held accountable. But now this seems like an everyday occurrence. And so blatantly and obviously in the case of Pretty and Good, see you state, we're not working with you. It's just mass border patrol and ICE Gestapo. We run the show. You don't get to know anything. So now they're trying. It's going to be a difficult lawsuit, Harry, because our system, and you and I talk so much about this, actually the rules of the game aren't like made for this. Like, what happens if you, let's say you were playing soccer, but you remove all of the referees and you give one of the team like hockey sticks to start slashing people in the face. And you're like, hey, referees, you're supposed to, well, no one, I don't know. What a terrible example.
No cleats. So, Ben, let's start here. Rare, unprecedented is the answer. It's rare for the U.S. to be involved in the prosecution of federal officers, but it certainly happens when federal officers use excessive force and are unjustified. We all saw these videos of the murders of Pretty and Good. Now, the DOJ came out of the box. They've since tried to backpedal, saying, oh, it was all domestic terrorists. Our guys were blameless. But it's very clear, and has always been the case, when an officer, state or federal, uses excessive force, especially if a death is involved, the DOJ and the states both have big sovereign interests. The U.S.'s sovereign interest are in trying to vindicate the murder that happened. It doesn't matter that a federal official did it. So what would happen? And I'm saying in every single case where this has occurred, the DOJ would either say there might be a little bit of a tussle about who goes first, or the DOJ might say sometimes you go first and we'll be a backstop, or in rare instances, the DOJ might say, we're kind of out of this one. You've got the primary interest. Go for it. What they will never do, literally has never happened, is to say, we're going to throw up obstacles so you cannot go forward. And guess what? They have in possession, and they've, taken away and put aside where no one can touch it. The car, for example, that Renee Good was riding in, you remember the shots fired at her, the forensic evidence, blood on the seats, the casings, all kinds of stuff like that, but also statements by officers involved. And there's a set of regulations that the department has that Minnesota has tried to go through. They're called TUI regulations. And when you want info from the feds and they're not just giving it over as they would here normally, you ask pretty please, and they go through hoops. Guess what's happened here? They asked pretty please to the Department of Homeland Security, which has the physical possession of the car, which is shrink wrapped and somewhere hundreds of miles away, and the other stuff. And they responded, this isn't really the kind of thing where you ask us, go to DOJ. All right. And, we now understand, by the way, what's been taking so long for these charges to come forward. They went to the DOJ. And they wrote, we're going through your TUI regulations, and then did it again. And DOJ has done exactly nothing, hasn't even responded. And that has to be purposeful, it seems to me, because one thing that the TUI regs require, you can sue, but there has to be a final agency action. So right now, DOJ can go into court and say, it's still pending. We don't know what to tell you. For that reason, Minnesota has done a separate cause of action here saying, by not answering, they're violating the Administrative Procedures Act. But I'm here to tell you, this is if the DOJ wants to erect it, and they do, and it's never happened before, this is a really difficult minefield, because it's not just saying we tried under TUI. It's a whole nother series of hurdles to say, okay, now give us the evidence. I'll say very quickly, this will play out more, but the law is a little bit more favorable in some circuits than others, and one where it's more favorable for Minnesota, DC. So this lawsuit that Minnesota brought today is actually filed in the District of Columbia. But they are going to have a hell of a time trying to get over these TUI requirements. And then they just said flat out what really is right here, which is we're sovereigns. This is 10th Amendment in this country. Federalism. We should be able to have our subpoenas, which we've subpoenaed you, recognized. And the DOJ, you can be sure, is going to say, yeah, they're sovereigns. Yeah, there's the 10th Amendment, but they can't use it to force our hand. So you're going to see all kinds of procedural bobbing and weaving. And I think Minnesota is going to have a real uphill battle. But let me say one final point, and really, this is going to be playing out for weeks. Let's say they can't get the car. Let's say they can't get the guns. Let's say they can't even get statements. That in the past, I worked on the Rodney King case. There was one blurry video, nothing else. That would have been really hard. In 2026, though, and we saw this, there's so many videos and you can put them together. New York Times did a bang up job on this and really see what happened. And you can really have a substitute even without the car. Now, the defense, and we're talking about, defendants being Jonathan Ross and the customs agents who are involved in Preddy, might come forward and say, where's the car? And what about the guns? But I think then, and this is getting pretty in the weeds here, but you've been in trials and you know how it would work. I think it matters here. Minnesota can say, Your Honor, they know very well what happened to it. The federal government won't give it. We ask for an instruction to the jury making that clear. And if at the end of the day you've got such clear video and argument, it still is a winnable case, but a much, much harder one. And the bottom line here is it is atrocious to have, justice here under federal law or state law is to prosecute people who did not have reason to think they were in imminent danger of deadly harm. And if that's true, and we saw it, that's a crime in the federal system. That's a crime in the state system. The sovereign's interests dovetail perfectly. But for political reasons, and we saw them, we saw Stephen Miller, we saw Kristi Noem, we heard Donald Trump come right out of the box. They are not simply standing to the side, but literally putting obstacles in the vindication of the interests that Minnesota has in common with DOJ. Never happened before, and really, really nasty.
Harry, we just want the evidence at the end of the day. Just turn it over. And look, if the evidence shows X, it shows X. If it shows Y, it shows Y. We're all big girls and big boys and big people here, and we can synthesize evidence and facts, but stop withholding it from us. That's one of my biggest gripes, and it's so funny, with bringing on Scott MacFarlane at Scott MacFarlane News and his YouTube channel and the growth and all of that. It's
hey, by the way, Ben, way to go! What a coup for Midas Network. Anyway,
it's just so fascinating though to see like a Caroline Levitt and a Stephen Chung in the White House attack us and say far leftist. And, and I said, you can call me whatever you want if it means standing up for humanity, dignity, rule of law, affordability. You go through the list, helping marginalized communities. But it just, at the end of the day, what you and I do here, Harry, as you know, is very detailed, minutia focused analysis on facts and evidence and footnotes, and we'll take it wherever it goes, show it to me. But it's just funny that that's viewed as a far left position and that's like a framing of it, when I'm just like, okay, I mean, call me what you want to call me, but let's just get to the facts and the heart of it, Harry. I'll let you say it.
Yeah, you're so right. Because look, if you really believe that, hey, I'm worried. I want my guys to get a fair shake. They were federal officers. Okay. What does that mean? That means you let the jury system run its course. You give over the evidence, of course, so there can be a full-bodied judgment. Here, they are what they're doing is specifically to keep the justice process from running its course, even though that's supposedly what their mission is supposed to be. So you're exactly right. All we're talking about, let us have it says subpoena. We could get it from anyone else. We want it from you. You're no different. We're just trying to take the process of justice forward and serve it up. Why shouldn't the jury that decides this have the full picture? And if the answer is because, well, you didn't comply with the TUI regulations, something is really, I think, tinny and hypocritical about that. They should let the system go through its paces.
Everybody subscribe to Harry Litman's YouTube channel, Talking Feds. Just search Talking Feds, Talking Feds Substack, and Talking Feds Podcast. Thanks, Harry.
Hey, thanks, Ben.
And everybody hit subscribe here. Let's get to 7 million.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.